India, a land of vibrant culture and deep-rooted traditions, grapples with a paradox. At the heart of this contradiction lies the world's oldest profession, prostitution. The law as it stands paints a blurry picture. It neither criminalizes nor legalizes the act of exchanging sex for money. Solicitation, the act of publicly seeking or offering sexual services, is a criminal offense. Establishing or managing a brothel is illegal. Pimping, the exploitation of individuals for sexual services, is strictly prohibited under the law. Yet, the very act that fuels these activities remains untouched by the long arm of the law. This intricate web of legal contradictions creates a breeding ground for an invisible industry, one that thrives in the shadows. The legal ambiguity surrounding prostitution in India speaks volumes about the societal and moral complexities attached to the profession. On one hand, there's an acknowledgement of its existence, a tacit understanding that it's a reality within the societal fabric. On the other hand, there's a reluctance to explicitly legalize it, perhaps stemming from deep-rooted moral and cultural beliefs. This reluctance, however, does little to address the ground realities. Instead, it pushes the entire industry underground, shrouding it in secrecy and making it susceptible to exploitation and abuse. This fear of judgment and persecution prevents many women from seeking help or accessing essential services, pushing them further into the margins of society. This legal ambiguity surrounding prostitution in India reflects a larger societal paradox. India, a nation that reveres goddesses and celebrates female energy, struggles to reconcile its reverence for women with the harsh realities faced by those who engage in sex work. This dissonance between cultural ideals and societal realities is at the heart of the issue. Ancient texts like the Kama Sutra openly discuss various aspects of sexuality, including courtesanship. On the other hand, societal norms, often influenced by religious and patriarchal structures, tend to stigmatize and ostracize those who operate outside the conventionally accepted boundaries of sexuality. This clash between traditional values and evolving social norms further complicates the debate surrounding prostitution in India. The legal veil that hangs over prostitution in India does little to address the multifaceted reality of the women who find themselves entangled in its web. It's crucial to remember that behind the statistics and legal debates, there are real lives, individual stories of struggle, resilience, and often exploitation. Some are driven by poverty, lacking viable alternatives to support themselves and their families. Others are victims of trafficking, lured into the profession with false promises of a better life, only to find themselves trapped in a cycle of exploitation. To truly understand the hidden reality of prostitution in India, we must be willing to listen to their stories, to acknowledge their humanity, and to advocate for their rights and safety. Imagine reading a law book that dances around the subject, never quite condemning it, yet never truly allowing it. That's the reality of prostitution in India. The act itself exists in a legal twilight zone. It's not a crime to engage in sexual activity for payment, but everything surrounding it is. This legal tightrope walk creates a paradox. A woman selling her body isn't breaking the law, but the moment someone solicits her services, they've crossed the line. The law, in its attempt to maintain a sense of moral order, ends up pushing the entire industry underground. This legal ambiguity has birthed an invisible industry, one that operates under the radar, hidden in plain sight. Brothels masquerade as massage parlors or boarding houses, their true nature whispered through word of mouth and coded language. The internet, with its veil of anonymity, has become a thriving marketplace for these services, further obscuring the industry and making it even harder to regulate. This clandestine nature of the industry makes it incredibly difficult to gauge its true scale or even identify the key players. Data remains scarce, shrouded in secrecy, and fueled by speculation. This lack of transparency makes it challenging to address the issue effectively, to understand the needs of sex workers, or to offer them protection and support. The invisibility of this industry also makes it easier for those who exploit others to operate with impunity. The price of this legal ambiguity is paid by the women who find themselves caught in the crosshairs of this complex issue. Denied legal recognition and protection, they are often left to navigate a treacherous landscape, vulnerable to exploitation, abuse, and social stigma. Imagine living a life where your profession is shrouded in secrecy, where you are denied basic rights and dignity. They live with the constant fear of police raids, social ostracization, and the ever-present threat of violence. This fear prevents them from accessing healthcare, legal aid, or even basic social services. The legal ambiguity, instead of protecting them, pushes them further into the shadows, denying them the agency and dignity they deserve. The legal gray area surrounding prostitution in India creates a web that traps women in a cycle of vulnerability and exploitation. Denied the legal recognition afforded to other professions, they are left without a safety net, vulnerable to abuse and exploitation from various quarters. The lack of clear legal frameworks makes it difficult for law enforcement to differentiate between consensual sex work and forced trafficking. This often leads to arbitrary arrests and detentions, further marginalizing and stigmatizing sex workers. The very system meant to protect them becomes their oppressor, pushing them deeper into the shadows. The absence of legal protection also leaves them vulnerable to exploitation by clients, pimps, and even law enforcement officials. Major Indian cities, bustling with life and energy, hold within them a secret world. Beneath the veneer of modernity and progress lies an intricate network of the underground sex industry, operating discreetly within the urban labyrinth. These hidden ecosystems thrive on a system of whispers and unspoken agreements, their existence known yet unacknowledged. In the heart of Mumbai's bustling red light district of Kamatipura, narrow lanes and crowded buildings conceal a world operating on its own terms. Kolkata's Sonagachi, one of the largest red light districts in Asia, stands as a stark testament to the scale and complexity of the trade. Delhi's GB Road, shrouded in a perpetual haze of secrecy, revealed the clandestine nature of the industry. The cityscape itself becomes a metaphor for the hidden reality of prostitution, existing in plain sight yet concealed from the public eye. The covert nature of the sex industry in India necessitates a complex system of operations, hidden from the scrutiny of law enforcement and the judgment of society. Brothels often operate under the guise of legitimate businesses, masquerading as massage parlors, beauty salons, or even ordinary residential homes. This facade of normalcy serves as a shield, protecting the industry from outside interference. Within these clandestine spaces, a complex web of relationships dictates the power dynamics. Madams, often former sex workers themselves, control the operations, managing the girls, negotiating with clients, and ensuring the smooth functioning of the establishment. The girls, often young and vulnerable, navigate this world with a mix of defiance and resignation. The closed doors of these establishments conceal stories of exploitation, abuse, and resilience, a stark reminder of the human cost of operating outside the purview of the law. The digital revolution has fundamentally transformed the landscape of the sex industry in India. The internet, with its promise of anonymity and accessibility, has become a thriving marketplace for sexual services, further obscuring the industry and complicating attempts at regulation and oversight. Websites and social media platforms, often disguised as escort services or dating sites, provide a platform for clients and sex workers to connect, removing the need for physical brothels and traditional intermediaries. This shift to the online realm presents both challenges and opportunities. On the one hand, it offers a degree of anonymity and agency to sex workers, allowing them to control their interaction, set their prices, and avoid exploitative middlemen. On the other hand, it also exposes them to new risks, including online harassment, cyberbullying, and the possibility of encountering law enforcement posing as clients. The anonymity of the online world makes it easier for traffickers to operate undetected, highlighting the need for increased vigilance and cross-border collaboration to combat this growing problem. Behind the statistics and the legal debates, it's crucial to remember the human faces of the sex industry. Each woman working within this clandestine world carries her own story, her own reasons for entering the trade, and her own dreams for a different future. Their narratives challenge us to look beyond the stereotypes and moral judgments, urging us to confront the systemic inequalities that perpetuate their vulnerability. There's Maya, a single mother forced into the trade to support her children after her husband's death. There's Priya, trafficked from a rural village with the promise of a better life, only to find herself trapped in a cycle of exploitation. And there's Rani, who entered the trade out of desperation, fleeing an abusive home environment, seeking refuge in a world that offered her a semblance of control. These stories reveal the complexities of choice, circumstance, and survival that define the lives of countless women caught in the web of prostitution. The underground nature of the sex industry in India thrives on a system of silences. The legal ambiguity surrounding the profession creates a climate of fear and uncertainty, discouraging open dialogue and hindering efforts to address the issue effectively. The stigma attached to sex work further silences the voices of those involved, preventing them from seeking help or accessing essential services without fear of judgment or persecution. This conspiracy of silence benefits those who exploit and abuse the vulnerable. Pimps and traffickers operate with impunity, their actions hidden from scrutiny. Corrupt law enforcement officials turn a blind eye to the plight of sex workers, often participating in the exploitation themselves, and society at large, uncomfortable with confronting the realities of the trade, chooses to look away, perpetuating the cycle of invisibility and marginalization. Breaking this silence is crucial to addressing the challenges faced by sex workers in India. Poverty casts a long, dark shadow over many facets of life in India, especially in prostitution. For countless women, the sex trade is driven by a lack of economic alternatives. Prostitution often emerges as the only solution to feed their families. Many come from impoverished rural areas with scarce opportunities. Migration to cities often leads to disillusionment. The promise of income through sex work becomes a beacon of hope. Human trafficking is a dark and pervasive reality that feeds into the sex industry in India. Women and girls, often from vulnerable backgrounds, are lured into the trade with false promises of employment, education, or marriage. Once entrapped, escaping the web of traffickers becomes an almost insurmountable challenge. Traffickers prey on the desperation and naivety of their victims. They exploit the trust and hopes of families who believe they are sending their daughters away for a better life. These young women are then transported across states or even international borders, isolated from their support systems, and rendered powerless against their captors. The methods used by traffickers are both cunning and brutal. Victims are often subjected to physical and psychological abuse to break their spirit and make them compliant. This includes beatings, starvation, and threats against their families. Such tactics ensure that the women remain subservient and fearful of attempting escape. The journey into prostitution often begins with broken promises and betrayed trust. Many women are deceived by those they trust the most, family members, friends, or romantic partners who sell them into the trade. These betrayals not only trap women in a life of exploitation, but also shatter their sense of safety and trust in others. The promise of a well-paying job in the city is a common lure. Women are often told they will work as domestic helpers, factory workers, or in other respectable professions. However, upon arrival, the reality is starkly different. They find themselves in brothels or massage parlors, with no way to return home and no one to turn to for help. The psychological impact of such betrayal is profound. The women are not only physically trapped, but also emotionally scarred. The sense of betrayal from those they trusted erodes their self-worth and makes it difficult to form trusting relationships in the future. This emotional turmoil compounds their vulnerability, making it even harder to escape the cycle of exploitation. Section 4. The vicious cycle of exploitation. Once within the sex trade, women often find themselves caught in a vicious cycle of exploitation. The initial reasons that push them into the trade, poverty, trafficking, and betrayal, create a situation where living becomes nearly impossible. The sex industry operates in a manner that keeps its workers dependent and vulnerable. The financial instability of sex work is a significant factor in this cycle. Earnings are often erratic, with women having to pay a substantial portion to brothel owners, pimps, or madams. This leaves them with little savings or resources to start a new life. The immediate need for money to cover basic living expenses creates a dependency on the trade. Exploitation also comes in the form of violence and abuse. Women in the sex trade are frequently subjected to physical and sexual violence from clients, pimps, and sometimes even law enforcement. This constant threat of violence creates an environment of fear, making it difficult for women to seek help or consider leaving the trade. Additionally, the social stigma attached to sex work further entraps the women. The fear of ostracization and judgment from society prevents many from seeking alternative employment. The lack of social acceptance and support creates an insurmountable barrier, reinforcing their dependence on the sex industry as their only means of survival. Section 5. The human face of desperation. Behind the statistics of prostitution, there are real human faces. Women with stories of desperation and survival. These stories remind us of the individual lives affected by this trade. Take Rupa, from a small village in Uttar Pradesh. Driven by poverty, she moved to Mumbai for work. Deceived by a recruiter, she ended up in a brothel. Despite her situation, Rupa dreams of a better future for her children. Their courage and perseverance are a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure. Section 1. The price of pleasure. The world's oldest profession often comes with a hefty price tag. These women navigate a treacherous landscape riddled with exploitation and violence. The trade exposes them to a range of dangers. Unprotected sex heightens the risk of infections, including HIV/AIDS. The constant fear of violence looms large over their lives. Power dynamics often leave women with little recourse. Stigma makes it difficult to seek protection from law enforcement. Section 2. The weight of stigma. The social stigma attached to prostitution in India acts as an invisible shackle, binding women to a life of secrecy and shame. Society, quick to judge and condemn, often fails to acknowledge the circumstances that lead women into this profession. This stigma pushes women further into the shadows, making it nearly impossible to leave the trade. The fear of social rejection prevents them from seeking alternative employment or confiding in loved ones. Section 3. Healthcare behind bars. Access to healthcare remains a distant dream for many women in the sex trade. The fear of judgment from healthcare professionals, coupled with the societal stigma, prevents them from seeking medical attention even for basic health care needs. This fear is not unfounded. Discrimination within the healthcare system is a harsh reality, with sex workers often subjected to moral policing, judgmental attitudes, and even denial of treatment. This lack of empathy and understanding further alienates them from seeking the care they deserve. The situation is further complicated by the legal gray area surrounding prostitution. Women rescued from brothels or during police raids are often treated as criminals rather than victims, further deterring them from seeking help or reporting abuse. This lack of access to health care has dire consequences. Sexually transmitted infections, if left untreated, can lead to serious health complications. Reproductive health issues often go unaddressed, increasing the risk of unwanted pregnancies and unsafe abortions. The physical and emotional toll of their profession takes a heavy toll on their overall well-being. Section 4, where hope fades. For many women trapped in the sex trade, the dream of a different life fades with each passing day. The constant struggle for survival, the lack of agency over their own bodies, and the absence of support systems create a sense of hopelessness and despair. The trauma of their experiences, often compounded by physical and sexual abuse, leaves deep emotional scars. Post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression are common among sex workers, yet access to mental health services remains limited. The lack of viable alternatives further diminishes their hope for a brighter future. The stigma attached to their profession makes it difficult to secure legitimate employment, even if they manage to escape the clutches of the trade. This sense of hopelessness is further compounded by the indifference of society and the inadequacy of government interventions. The lack of comprehensive rehabilitation programs, coupled with the social stigma, leaves many women feeling trapped, their dreams of a different life slipping away. Section 5, a call for dignity. The hidden reality of prostitution in India is a stark reminder of the resilience of the human spirit even in the face of adversity. It demands a shift in societal attitudes, a recognition of their agency and their right to a life of dignity and respect. Legal reforms that decriminalize sex work and recognize it as a legitimate profession are crucial. Comprehensive rehabilitation programs that provide economic opportunities and vocational training are essential. Only when we see the human faces behind the labels can we create a just and equitable society. Section 1, Unveiling the Hidden Reality. Our exploration of prostitution in India has unveiled a complex and often contradictory reality. The act exists in a shadow zone, neither explicitly legal nor illegal. This ambiguity drives the trade underground, fostering exploitation and abuse. We've journeyed through bustling streets, revealing the clandestine operations of the sex industry. Stories of poverty, trafficking, and betrayal shatter the monolithic narrative surrounding sex work. The human cost of this hidden reality is undeniable. Beyond morality, a call for pragmatism. The debate surrounding prostitution is often mired in moral judgments. These moral considerations overshadow the need for pragmatic solutions. Criminalizing sex work does little to eradicate the trade. Instead, it pushes it further underground, making it more dangerous. Recognizing sex work as a legitimate profession can ensure safety and well-being. Decriminalization empowers sex workers to report abuse and access health care, empowering agency, a human rights imperative. At the heart of the discourse surrounding prostitution lies the fundamental issue of agency. The right to make choices about their own body and life is a cornerstone of human rights. Denying sex workers this agency perpetuates their vulnerability. Empowerment begins with recognizing sex workers as individuals with rights. Breaking the cycle. A multi-pronged approach. Addressing the complexities of prostitution in India demands a multi-pronged approach, one that tackles the issue from various angles, addressing not just the symptoms but also the root causes that fuel the cycle of exploitation. Poverty, a significant driving force behind the entry of many women into sex work, requires a multifaceted response. Investing in education, particularly for girls and women, is crucial to breaking the cycle of poverty and empowering them to pursue alternative livelihoods, creating economic opportunities, providing vocational training, and ensuring access to microfinance can provide viable pathways to financial independence. Combating human trafficking requires a concerted effort from law enforcement agencies, government bodies, and NGOs. Strengthening border controls, cracking down on trafficking networks, and prosecuting traffickers to the fullest extent of the law are crucial steps. Equally important is providing comprehensive support to trafficking survivors, including shelter, healthcare, counseling, and legal aid to help them rebuild their lives towards a just and equitable future. The journey towards a just and equitable future for sex workers in India is fraught with challenges. Yet, it is a journey we must undertake, for it is a journey towards upholding the dignity and rights of all individuals. It is a journey that demands empathy, understanding, and a willingness to look beyond moral judgments. It requires a commitment to challenging the status quo and advocating for those whose voices have been silenced. Thanks for watching, and please remember to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment.